Hilton, tortured for 2 days, tossed into a cell that was 8 feet long and 8 feet wide. Exactly the size of this riser. George, makes me feel at home. Inside my new little home, I had nothing to do, no books to read, no windows to look out, no TV, telephone, BlackBerry, Bluetooth. I didn't have a pencil or a piece of paper. 2,103 days. Didn't have an American flag either. But in every cell, we made one up. And sometimes it was a rat's nest. Sometimes it was bars on the blanked out windows. But we pledged our allegiance to this flag, just like we've done here today. So we learned a lot in the prison cell. First thing, we learned a lot about pain. This hurts a lot. Physically, mentally, spiritually. Second thing you learn, you're probably not going to believe this at first, but you learn to accept the pain. In fact, you learn to think about things far away, sunny beaches, warm breezes, thoughts of home, and you know what happens? You get used to this. In fact, you get so comfortable in your little 8 foot by 8 foot prison cell that the last place you want to go is outside the cell because it's dark and lonely out here. At least you know the devil in the light. Here's what happens. You get this restriction built up. And it's not the 8 feet between the walls. It's the 8 inches between your ears. You're in a mental box. And this is going to be a mental game. But it didn't take me very long. 3 steps by 3 steps, I was going nuts. I finally decided, Charlie, if you're going to survive this, you're going to have to come up with something to do. Make a little game to play. Get creative here. Keep your mind active. I thought that's what I'll do. I'll make a little deck of cards, and I did. I constructed a little deck of playing cards about the size of postage stamps. I tore these cards from 52 little strips of toilet paper. And I learned this in that prison camp. Toilet paper is tough to shuffle. You don't lick your fingers very much. Okay, before we get back to the prison scene, I want to tell you a couple things. First of all, TR and I are on a panel at 12:15, so we got to bug out of here about 12:05 or something, TR. And obviously you're all welcome to the panel. It's down in the ballroom. So, second thing is, it's just really a treat to rub elbows with guys and gals that have been through the same experiences that I have been. Because there's so much similarity and so many things that we can talk about, so many common people we know. But I want to direct my remarks to 3 A-4 drivers that many of you know or have heard about that I was in a prison camp with. Because the leadership, the naval aviation leadership in that prison camp was far and none the best I've ever seen. So I'm in this prison cell, okay? Pacing back and forth one way or the other, feeling really sorry for myself, okay? You know, I flew the skies in Vietnam, as a lot of you did, thinking that you'd never get shot down to begin with. You were bulletproof. I don't think you could fly the missions if you thought you were going to get shot down. But the second thing I thought, well, if I am shot down and captured, I'll never give in. I'll never give up on the code of conduct. I'll never give them more than name, rank, serial number, date of birth. And that was my thought going into the battle. Well, didn't take very long or much pain. A couple of days of torture, and I was singing like a canary. And I felt very guilty about that. You know, I felt very embarrassed that I hadn't accomplished my mission. And I'm thinking to myself, how can I ever go back to my squadron mates? How can I ever talk to these guys? How can I even go back to my family? Maybe I won't. Maybe I'll just go back to some other country where I won't have to tell my story of disaster. Incidentally, I'm not the only one that had that feeling. You talked about any other POW, and that was our first thought. And TR and I were talking about this earlier today. I never met this guy, but TR knew him really well. And Ken refused to get involved. And I think primarily because he felt, as I did, that he didn't want to talk to anybody else. He didn't want to admit that he'd failed in his mission so miserably. So there I was, misery and pain, okay, bleeding from 4 open wounds, no medical care, down to maybe 115 pounds, I weigh 170 today, and rotting away in this communist prison camp and feeling sorry for myself. I heard in the far corner the chirping noise of a cricket. I walked over to check it out, no cricket at all, a piece of wire about that long poked through a hole at the base of the cell wall and scratching on my concrete floor. Are you with me? Can you imagine what might be going through your mind when you saw a wire coming through a rat hole in your prison cell? I'm thinking, the enemy's not sophisticated enough to try to trick me. It's got to be an American. If it's an American, it's got to be a fighter pilot, since that's who's in these prison camps. It's an air war, and guys are getting shot down and taken prisoner. The guys in the South got killed for the most part, so we had all pilots and air crews in that prison camp. And so I'm thinking, if it's not the enemy, it's got to be an airman. It's got to be an American. And boy, would I like to talk to another fighter pilot. Wow, we can tell some stories. But I bet that guy's tougher than I am. I bet he probably didn't cry for mercy when they tortured him. He probably stuck with name, rank, serial number, date of birth, that I was unable to do. So I'm losing interest in communicating with anybody. And if I can just roll over here in the corner of this prison cell and wait, you know, surely in a few years the Marines will break down the gates and I'll be set free. I'll never have to take another risk the rest of my life. No, I kept scratching. I kept sweating. And about the only reason I even paid any attention to this wire after I decided not to tug on it was I was afraid the guards were going to hear the wire and come in and beat me up again. So a couple of hours went by. Finally, I decided to walk over and reach down and grab that little wire and tug. And the wire tugged back. I tugged again and it disappeared right back through that rat hole. The wire came back about an hour later. This time it had a note wrapped around the end of it. The note was written on a dirty piece of toilet paper. I could barely make it out. But the note said, memorize this code, then eat this note. Volunteered for a lot of things in the Navy. I did it. I memorized the code. The TAP code, that many of you know or have heard of, it's a 5x5 matrix of the alphabet. Numbers down the side, across the top, any letter could be represented by 2 numbers, number of the line, number of the row. A, first line, first row, 1 tug, 1 more tug. Z, 5th line. Do you think your email is cumbersome? Try this. It worked. This silly, archaic, cumbersome code became our language. More than that, it became our life's blood. It was absolutely vital that we communicated with other prisoners. So I started tugging on this wire in this code that I had just learned, and found on the other end of the wire Lieutenant Commander Bob Shoemaker. Many of you know or probably flew with Bob. He'd been there for 2 years when I showed up. He'd been piecing together little bits of wire, stuffing them out a hole in his cell wall across a storeroom. There was a storeroom between our 2 prison cells. And he fished that little wire over the boxes and around the shovels and through the ropes and into the little hole in my cell wall 14 feet away. Unbelievable.
Wow.
Just to contact me. How you doing, buddy? His first words. My first words. I'm doing terrible. Buddy. I said, this is my president sent me over. It's his dirty political war, not mine. I'm the victim of circumstances beyond my control. The enemy's torturing prisoners. They signed that Geneva Convention, not abiding by it. It's not fair what's going on in my life, but it's not my fault. I'm the victim of circumstances beyond my control. It was not my private airplane I flew in here. That was a U.S. government airplane. Congress bought it. I didn't. They should be here. I should not. He said, you want to know your biggest problem? I said, you mean I have problems bigger than the ones I can see? He said, sure sounds like it. He said, it sounds like you're suffering from a fairly common prison disease. A lot of guys get it. Some guys die from it. Oh, man. What's the name of this disease? I said. He said, well, around here we just call it prison thinking. I said, prison thinking? He said, Roger, you think you're a prisoner. I dropped that wire. I stepped back from the corner of that cell. A little self-analysis. I'm still bleeding from those 4 open wounds, okay? 4 holes in my body with blood running out. Got boils. Developing these boils all over my face. I can barely see through these boils, and so many on my body I can't count them all. Down 115 pounds a figure. My sole possession in life at this point is a rag I have knotted around my waist to hide my nudity. Clearly, I'm rotting away in a communist prison camp, and now, to add insult to injury, they put me next to a positive thinker. I kept tugging. Tell me about this prison thinking stuff. He said, don't you see, when a pilot is first blown out of the sky, what's the first emotion? Oh God, why me? This is so terrible. What could be worse than this? This event will never have any value. In fact, the best this time in my life can ever be is a period of time I can someday forget. It's not my fault. I didn't start this war. I don't control the enemy. I didn't build that airplane. Hoisted every problem. I do what's that. He said, you'll find in this prison camp that when you start blaming other people for your problems, you give away control of your life. He said, you will find you just joined the best team you'll ever play on. He said, we have leadership here, bar none, the best you will ever see, in or out of the Navy. He said, our senior officer, A-4 pilot, Jim Stockdale, has turned this thing around. We are not victims. We are not on the defensive. We are warriors, and we will pursue this war with all of our might and whatever we can till our last dying breath. So pull up your big boy pants. We've got a war to fight. I couldn't believe, I'm a JG, okay? I can't believe this, you know? Got a bunch of senior officers down in the end of the cell block, and they're telling me it's all going to be okay. But it worked. It worked. There was a study done about 5 or 6 years ago. You know, the SPOWs take a physical, Pensacola, every year, mental and physical, and they compared us to a control group they started with a bunch of pilots that didn't get shot down. And then there was another study that was done of all the combatants of Vietnam. 30.6% had PTSD. Of the prisoners of war, 4% of us had PTSD. And it's mostly the guys that were shot down near the end of the war, were not tortured, and were only POWs for a few weeks or a month or two. Figure that out. Folks that know a whole lot more about this than I, the psychologists, psychiatrists that write books, say it's primarily because of the leadership. And primarily James Bond Stockdale. His motto that he passed around was 3 words. And he would say, every decision you make in this prison camp has to be filtered through these 3 words. Return with honor. We commissioned a destroyer a few years ago, a Stockdale destroyer. My wife and my son went down to San Diego, and we rode that destroyer up to Point Hueneme, where we commissioned the destroyer. And so I spoke to the crew and told them all I knew about Stockdale. And on the side of the destroyer, it says, return with honor. So he turned things around for all of us. And it was amazing how, even in the depths of despair, when you've got communication, when you've got good leadership, and when you have a purpose in life, how well it goes. He wasn't the only A4 leader there. John McCain had been my flight instructor in Meridian. He taught me to fly jets. So I knew him. His brother Joe McCain was at the Naval Academy with the same company, the Naval Academy, and so I knew Joe better, even better than I knew John. And John was a crazy instructor. You did not want to get your check right with John McCain. Of course, this is the A-4. This is the we're flying T2Js. Thank you. And of course, he sat in the back seat, I'm in the front seat. And my helmet had some creases in it where he had taken his off of his knee pad and hit that was his favorite thing, was getting our attention with his knee pad on the back of our head. And the crazy guy taught me to fly, taught me to drink flaming hookers. How many in this crowd know what a flaming hooker is? Okay. Oh, I guess it's not as bad as it sounds, ladies. It's actually a drink of pure alcohol that you light a fire so it's flaming, and then you chug like this thing, and you try to blow a little flame, you know, out of your mouth after it's all in your stomach. Sometimes it works. Sometimes if you don't do it right, you get a lung full of fire. And those, you know, those Nomad flight suits that are supposed to be fire resistant, and a little flaming hooker will set it all on fire. So that was John McCain, and so I got to know him there. Well, I was shot down. He came into the camp 5 months after I did. I was shot down in May of '67. He was shot down in August. And in my prison cell, I could jimmy the door a little bit and peek through my door, and I could see the personnel gate, the door, and I'd see pilots come through there, you know, flight suits and roughed up and hog-tied usually and gagged and blindfolded, and they would come through the gate, and they would walk in, and they'd put them in a cell. This time, it's a stretcher with guards on two ends and a guy that's just covered with bloody rags. In fact, all I could see was an arm over the edge, and it was green and gray. I didn't know if he was alive or dead. They stuffed him in cell 3. I was in cell 1 in that particular prison camp. And we thought, man, this guy's really hurting if he's alive. We better make communication with him, or he's going to go downhill in a hurry. And so we tried. The guys next door to me in cell 2 tried to communicate with him and couldn't do it. Several weeks went by. Every day more bloody rags came out of that cell. We knew he was alive. Then into the camp came a pair of clippers, the old hand clippers. That was always bad news. It meant the POW was going to be cleaned up to see a delegation. This is the days, you remember Jane Fonda, Ramsey Clark, Tom Hayden, all the anti-war element would come over, and they would choose one of us, clean us up, shave, haircut, present us to the delegation as proof of their lenient and humane treatment. It was a total sham, and frequently they had to torture a guy to say that the treatment was good. Just craziness. They took the clippers into cell 3, the new guy. So the next day, I'm peeking through my crack in the door, and I could barely see outside of cell 3 the biggest pile of white hair, just almost fluorescent hair. Most of us were in our 20s and early 30s, and very few guys were prematurely gray, and I'm looking at that hair, and I'm thinking, oh man, I only know one guy that's got hair like that. My old flight instructor's been shot down, John McCain. I still didn't know for sure, so the next day I got outside my cell with my bucket going towards the sewer house, and his cell was right across from the sewer house. And so I let the guard get a little ahead of me. As I passed cell 3, I whistled. I came back past cell 3, very faintly from inside that cell I heard. It was John McCain. Was he torn up? 7 broken bones. They were twisting his broken bones to torture the poor guy. But I don't think there was a tougher man. Well, maybe Stockdale was tougher than McCain, but McCain was not only tough, he was in their face all the time. Anytime there was any interruption in the camp agenda, you knew it was McCain was behind it. You know, he was the maverick for sure, even in those days. But what a great guy in that prison camp. As I said, his cell was right across the path from the sewer house. The sewer house was a brick sewer house. And inside, had a roof on the top, and inside was a hole in the ground where you dumped your bucket every 3 or 4 days. Our latrine was a 2-gallon bucket. Usually it was rusted out and didn't have a top on it and smelled to high heavens. But every couple of days you get to carry your bucket into the sewer house and dump your bucket. Now, the bad news was it was terrible inside that sewer house. I mean, it was just bugs and rats and all that stuff, and you had to hold your breath just to go in, or you had your whole sinus system cleaned out. The good news was, the guards didn't want to be in there either, and so they wouldn't follow us into the sewer house. And it was the only time, 24/7, that you were ever out of the sight of a guard. And so we decided it's a natural. We'll make a communication system out of the sewer house. As we did. We designated various cracks in the bricks to be various cell numbers, okay? It was like a P.O. box, okay? And so you'd walk in with notes written on toilet paper into the sewer house, and you'd collect your mail from your mailbox and stuff, and you'd leave your mail there, and it was a thing of beauty, you know. I mean, we would communicate with anybody around the whole prison camp, until one day, my buddy was walking down there with his bucket going to the sewer house. He turns the corner and drops his note out of his belt loop. Oh man, this is terrible. They're gonna figure this out. They're gonna hurt a lot of people just because and destroy our communication system. Well, McCain is standing there on his homemade crutches. He's looking out the crack in his door, and he sees what's happening. And immediately he starts banging on the door, screaming at the top of his lungs, cussing to high heaven. The guards came over, beat up John McCain, while my buddy picked up his note and went into the sewer house and saved the system. So, I don't know what your political leanings or your impression of John McCain. I know he wasn't the greatest Navy pilot ever, or the greatest instructor ever, but he was sure a tough guy in that prison camp. Another A-4 driver I'll tell you about is Danny Glenn. Danny Glenn was from Oklahoma, kind of a slow-walking, slow-talking guy. And I lived with Danny Glenn for 3 straight Christmases. For whatever reason, we were in the same cell 3 straight Christmases. The first one, and he was an architectural student and quite a good artist. So about October of the year, Danny and I were in this 4-man cell, and it was about 8 by 8 too. You know, you had very little space with 4 guys in a cell that large. Hey Dan, what are we going to do for Christmas this year? He said, Charlie, you know they come in every year on Christmas Eve and they raid ourselves and make sure we don't have any Christian paraphernalia or anything to do with Christmas. I said, yeah, but Dan, here's my plan. We're gonna do it a day early this year. We'll have Christmas on the 24th. On the 23rd, we'll have our stuff all done, and they won't find us. What do you want? So you see that dirty old wall we got there in the corner? I want a nativity scene on that wall. Dan Glenn went to work. I've never seen anything quite like it. He honed down bricks, okay, or rocks, or ashes, and created every color of the rainbow. I couldn't believe how he did all this, just little piles of dust underneath the bed. And then he borrowed a few hairs from some of us and made a little brush, and he painted on that wall a mural would be in any museum in the world. It was a beautiful thing. It was Bethlehem and the wise men and the shepherds and the star and the baby Jesus was all right there. We covered it up with rags on a little clothesline. Well, so the night of the 23rd came, and so we said our blessings and sang a few hymns and we're ready to go. And in came the guards, and they saw that. And it was a terrible violation of camp regulations, and so they scrubbed it all off. And we spent that night outside that cell, a December evening in the nude. They took all of our clothes. The next year, I'm in with Dan Glenn. We got a big room. This was after the Sante raid, okay, and they were so scared they put us all back into the Hanwha Hilton. The bad news was they didn't have enough cells for all of us, and so I was in a cell with 56 other guys, and the cell was about 20 feet long and about 30 feet wide. We each had 14 inches of bed space. And but the beauty was we were finally get together. You know, we were with each other, and we could sing and pray. And I was the chaplain of that unit, and so I had the church service. And so I'm talking to Danny Glenn and say, "Hey, Dan, what are we going to do for Christmas this year?" Charlie, you know what happens every year. They pull us out of there, and so I said, "But Dan, what happened on the 22nd this year? You know, they came in the 23rd last year. Surely they won't figure this out." "What do you want?" "See the corner? This is a cell with a lot of high ceilings on it." I said, "See that corner? On that corner, I want a Christmas tree. Okay? I want the tallest Christmas tree North Vietnam has ever seen." Dan went to work, and he built a Christmas tree. Okay? It was strings of popcorn, and it was lights, and a star at the top, and the base of the Christmas tree in mosaic letters it said, "Peace on Earth," and it was all built 100% out of toilet paper. Well, the 22nd came around. You probably guessed this already. In came the guards, and again, this was against camp regulations. That time we had 57 guys in the nude outside, and they were not too happy about Dan and me and our little Christmas spirit. The last Christmas I was there, I was in a two-man cell this time with Danny Glenn. We got to know each other pretty well. So about October, I turned to Glenn, to Danny, and I said, "Danny?" He turned to me and he said, "Nope." "I'm not doing this again, Charlie. You know, we got in a lot of trouble last year and the year before. This is it." "Come on, Dan. You know what's happening back in Oklahoma? You know, in Norman, they got the red and the greens out, and it may be a little snow out there, and they got people singing Christmas carols. Don't you want to get into that same spirit of your hometown?" "What do you want?" I said, "Well, Dan, you know, it's pretty dark." And he said, "Yeah, I know, it's dark in here." We were in the mountains up near the China border. He said, "We can't have Christmas." Here's my thought, okay? We're going to build a little projector, right? We're going to take some tar paper, and we're going to make a tube out of it, and cut a little hole in the middle, and we'll render a little bit of lard, you know, from our soup, and we'll make a candle, right? And we'll put the candle inside this little cylinder, and it'll project an image. And then we'll take a bunch of toilet paper with a little rice glue, and we'll make slides, right? And so we'll put these slides in front of the light, and it will project this image. We set to work. Again, just a phenomenal guy, Dan Glenn. And he cut out silhouettes of the wise men and the shepherds and Bethlehem, and we were ready to go. You guessed it. In they came again. Now, they didn't understand this. It was too complex for them to really understand what we were doing there. But they didn't actually take this stuff away. They just kicked it around and smashed it. And so that last Christmas, we didn't have on Christmas Eve because we spread out the slides, and we got the candle to light, and sure enough, last Christmas, Danny Glenn and I, two guys that had been there for too long, were singing Christmas carols to each other and watching this little slideshow. That's Danny Glenn. What a guy. One of the favorites, and you've heard this guy, Doug Hegdal. In fact, some of you might have been at SEER School. He came back and commanded at SEER School. A Navy sailor, enlisted guy, right? He was on a cruiser Canberra. Okay, in the middle of the night they were doing some inshore fire support, and he falls off the ship. And they picked him up and brought him into the prison camp. What a guy! Could he take a joke? He'd say, "I wasn't captured like you guys. You guys were tortured, and I was only pulled out of the water." But he started to work and set us all a standard that few of us could meet. He started memorizing our names. There were 254 of us. The list memorized our identifier, went back through the list, and he memorized our hometowns all across the country, our next of kin, wives and fathers. Finally, he memorized the telephone numbers of each of the relatives of each of the prisoners. Now that took 2 years. About that time, thanks primarily to our wives were back here petitioning our government and governments around the world to put pressure on the North Vietnamese to stop torturing their husbands. They sold the little silver bracelets. I know many of you wore those bracelets. And I had about 10,000 of those with my name on them. And they sold the bracelets to fund their trips around the world. And so the wives got together, and the government did not like this at all. In fact, Kissinger, in his autobiography, says that the wives of the prisoners of war were a pain in the side because they were trying to establish international policy without going through the government. But it worked. That effort forced the Vietnamese to stop torturing the guys for the most part. And in fact, they decided we're going to send some guys home early before the end of the war. Well, the first guy they went to was McCain. They said, we're going to send you home. At the time, his father, it was St. Pat, and pretty much in charge of the Vietnam War. And McCain said, in your dreams, you're sending me home early. I'd never embarrass my father by doing that. I'd never give up on my buddies, the POWs in this camp. You take your idea and shut it. And he got into a lot of trouble. They put him in solitary confinement for another 2 years just for that little trick. So they're still looking for somebody to send home. Somebody else is going to get hurt. So our senior man, Jim Peary, sends the message to the sailor, Doug Hegel, son, I want you to go home early. The sailor sent back, sir, with all due respect, I would rather stay here with the team. I want to march home with you guys. Our Jim sends back, that's not an option. Here's a direct order, shove off. Sailor said, aye, aye, sir. Home he comes. Now, write the script on this kid, 21 years old by then, in prison by accident, tortured, starved, humiliated, lonely, hadn't seen a woman in 2 years, and suddenly he has a brand new suit of clothes on, 2 years back pay in his pocket, and he's free on the streets of San Diego. What can you expect? No, that didn't happen. He started to travel. Had to go west coast to east, north to south, spend his own time, his own money. Went through each one of the hometowns he'd memorized, dialed each one of the telephone numbers he'd memorized, spoke to each one of the relatives he'd memorized, told them that the prisoner was alive. We have big reunions, the POWs. Get together, talk about the good old days. In come the generals and the admirals, and in come the congressmen and the senators, and the guy that gets a standing ovation is Seaman Douglas Hegel. Showed us all a thing or two. The war finally ended after years and years and years of thinking about it. We traded prisoners, 591 of us, 10,000 of them. Got on a C-141, and 90 minutes later I was putting these feet on free soil, Clark Air Force Base, the Philippines. Ran down the ladder and across that tarmac to the first phone I could find to call my wife. Yeah, I'd married my high school sweetheart after the Naval Academy. And I had that first conversation totally memorized. I was going to say, honey, it's been tough on you. But it's okay now. We're going to be better and tighter and closer than ever before. But she had gone. I called my parents back in Kansas. What has happened to my wife? They said, well, she hung on for 5 years, and just 3 months ago, your wife filed for divorce. She's engaged to another guy. Boy, you're talking about one gut punch after another. Happened to about half of us. Came home to divorces. It was tough on the ladies. In a lot of ways, I think it was tougher on the ladies than it was on the guys. We knew we were alive. They didn't know from day to day. We were confident we were going to go home and be better than ever. And they thought they might be caregiver for an invalid for the rest of their lives. In fact, the psychiatrists in and out of the military had prepared our wives, had briefed them that we might be institutionalized for the rest of our lives. That's what they thought. They were coming home from the prison camps in Vietnam. So she had gone, and I picked up my life, decided to get out of the regular Navy and got a reserve unit and flew A-4s out of Millington for a while, until they went to P3s. I took one look at that NATOPS manual and a P3. I said, no way I'm going to learn all these systems. I flew P3s for a little while, and then they sent the whole thing to Dallas. And, but I had a great time flying A4s out of Memphis. It was a great little airplane. I think of all the airplanes I could fly again, you know, just own privately, I'd have either an A4 or an F9. I love the F9. Cougar, great airplane. So I came back. My wife remarried the guy she was engaged to. I married a wonderful gal, some of you know, Susan, and she's went the wind beneath my wings. We have 4 kids and 4 grandkids. Two of our kids are married, and the third one is getting married next Thursday, and I'm officiating the wedding. So I can tell you, you know, on the internet, credit card, you can be a preacher too. So it's going to be fun. Ran a marathon a few years ago in Alaska, and it's called the Midnight Sun Run. Okay, I chose that one. It's the longest day of the year. Okay, on Saturday, closest to the longest day of the year. I chose that because I might need 24 hours of daylight to run 26 miles. Took 2 of my kids up there. Joe and Evie went with me, and there we were in the hotel the night before the race. And I'm telling my kids, hey, this is your dad's craziness. You know, I know you have no interest in this marathon, and so you guys sleep in, take it easy. I'll be back. I don't even know where this race is, but don't worry, I'll find it. I'll be back tomorrow afternoon. We'll go see a glacier or something. Oh, it was a hot day in Anchorage. I was about halfway around the course, and man, I hit the wall, just sweating like crazy, barely putting one foot in front of the other, thinking to myself, the most beautiful sight in the world is going to be that finish sign. But it wasn't. It was under the finish sign. Here's Joe, Evie, 2 of my kids cheering on the old man. When I finally got my breath, I went to my kids and I said, you just don't know how much it means to your father to have you here, but how did you find the finish line? Oh, well, Dad, we shared a cab with a couple of guys in the hotel. They knew where it was. I said, how did they know where it was? Well, Dad, they ran the race. They came back to the hotel. They had breakfast. They swam. They showered. And they came back to see you finish. I think we got time for just a couple of questions before I quit. Anybody got any burning thing? I'm open to anything.
Charlie, the one POW that disappeared and you never knew his name, did you ever find out his name?
No.
That's in your book.
Yeah.
Fascinating story.
It's a fascinating story, and we never ever figured out who that was. There's several mysteries, you know, still about that war. And for a long time we thought that we might have left some POWs over there. But it's been so long now, and there was never really much of a chance for anybody to survive all that. So, but we never found out. Another question?
You know Rodney Knudsen.
Sure. Yeah, Rod Knudsen and I were in the same camp for a while.
We went through P-Flight together.
Oh, really? Good guy. He's not in really good shape now. You know, this guy, in fact, the last time I saw him was at the Republican National Convention for McCain. We were supporting John McCain. And he was there with a big, I don't know if he wore a Stetson hat when he was flying, but he was quite a guy. But yeah, he's not doing it really well. As I say, TR and I got to get out of here. I'm doing we're both on the panel at 12 in the ballroom. After that, if you have any questions at all, or want to talk about who knows who, go ahead. No, your dinner's 11. Oh, I'm sorry, you're right. 11:15 is when that panel starts. And I'm the last guy on the panel, so I probably won't be on until Well, the way TR tells more stories, I might be on for 3 o'clock. They're all very interesting, TR. We all want to hear what you have to say.
Bring your white flag in for the bullshit side.
You know, any experience in life has good news and bad news, positives and negatives, and obviously there's a lot of negatives of being a prisoner of war. I would much have rather seen that more from your position, the cockpit of an A-4 and F-4. But the good news is, I served then, and I have served so many of you finest men I've ever met in the air or in the prison cell. So thank you for all you do, and God bless. Thank you.
Just want to, on behalf of the Skyhawk Association, we have a little presento here that is courtesy of one of our members. Todd Plumb put this together. Charlie will show it to you, but it's a collection of the airplanes that he flew while he was on active and reserve duty.
Well, that's wonderful.
Charlie, we can't thank you enough.
Well, thank you. This is really, really nice.
There's none other like this one. That's an original.
Okay. Well, good enough. Thanks, everybody. Appreciate that.